Let me ask you this. One of the things that we see here in Texas specifically, and I know it's going on in other states as well, our state assessment, the STAR, and
Hmm.
we have had great, and I'm seeing it, I'm going to unmute Randy's line. I am, again, putting you on the spot, Randy, but I want to know your take on this. Chris, Randy is a mechanical engineer in Austin, and he was finding that he couldn't do his daughter's math, and she was in the 5th grade, and the struggles with these new math standards here in Texas that came in 2012, but they were tested on the first time last year. But what Randy found is that in the STAR assessments and in the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, that this math, they weren't even teaching or testing kids actual math. It was all these process standards. And so the state assessment is not even a valid assessment, but here you have school districts who are deemed as failing, and they're going to be taken over by the state based on invalid assessments. That, to me, and nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody would ask Dan Patrick, you know, who's going to hold the state accountable for holding school districts accountable by an invalid accountability system. Nobody is talking about that. Chris, do you see that these assessments, are they even valid? And Randy, please chime in and ask any questions. I would love to know your take on this.
Well, in terms of valid, we have to ask what are we trying, what are we trying to know, okay? And valid for what purpose? If we're looking, to test basic knowledge, some parts of the test might be valid, some parts might not. But I think at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is a bigger issue. It's the issue of complex thinking, because complex thinking is related to creativity and strategic thinking, which we know that those are the important things that drive an innovation economy, and really separate. Those are the skills that with all things being equal, with academic knowledge, kids who are creative, innovative, entrepreneurial, okay, they're going to have better outcomes in life. So what we want to do is we really want to look at standards and assessments that really focus on complex thinking. And unfortunately, I mean, you're not in a Common Core state, but the Common Core standards don't do that. We've done that study too, where we analyzed the cognitive complexity of those standards, and we found them woefully inadequate. And as you point out, the Common Core mathematics is very process heavy, okay? Hardly any complex thinking going on there, and it sounds like the same thing's going on in Texas. So until we look, go ahead, Randy.
It's even worse. 2 weeks ago, we had Dr. Milgram come in and give his testimony to the State Board of Education here in Texas, and he informed them that what we have adopted here in Texas is actually worse than Common Core. And I can say that because I've taken the assessments and I've gone back and looked at what's in the standards, and we are truly testing what's in the standards, and what's in the standards is not what should be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not mathematics, or at least a large portion of it isn't.
Randy, tell the story that you told at the SBOE 2 weeks ago about the kids that you were working with in the group trying to teach them math. I think that story, and that's what I think we have to do, is tell the stories of what the reality is on the ground for these kids, what we're doing to our own children or allowing to be done to our own children. Can you tell that story, Randy?
Certainly. I was tutoring a group of 7th graders in math, and we were sitting around the table, and it was 10 problems, and I explained how you calculate the volume and lateral areas of prisms, and they got the concept. They understood the equation, could write the equation out, and I worked through the first problem with them and showed them how to do it, and then they expected them to carry that knowledge and work the next problem, and I sat there for a while and didn't realize that they finished the first problem. They had all gotten it right, but they wouldn't go to the next problem. They were waiting for input from the leader of the group. And this is, it took me a while to figure this out, but it was because of the way they're teaching at school, and everything's a collaborative effort. So it's the students who don't feel like they understand sit and wait for guidance from the person they think does understand. And I've been in classrooms, because I volunteer in the schools, and I've sat and watched groups of students collaborate, and every single one of them be wrong, but yet be praised by the teacher because the discussion of the problem was more important than getting the right answer. And I was actually asked to leave the classroom when I stepped in and worked the problem with them, showed them how to do it right. And I was told that I was stifling the discussion. So the whole way we're teaching is wrong.
And Chris, how do we, because I know that you work with teachers and with curriculum, and part of the challenge that we are seeing is that kids don't have the foundation knowledge, and that's what Dr. Milgram was saying. Before you can be innovative with math, you have to know the basics. You have to know, and you have to feel confident in doing that so that you can get to that higher order thinking skills. But it's like our teachers are not allowed, because there's so many standards, there's so many processes. So instead of the goal being getting the right answer and then kind of differentiating with different kids who learn it different ways, the teachers are focused on, I've got to teach all of these different processes, and the answer doesn't really matter as long as they know all these different processes. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing this in other places, Chris?
Well, you see some of that because of at least, like I said, I'm in a Common Core state in the other 40 states. You see that in the Common Core math because most of it is procedural knowledge. Okay, when you look at the standards, especially at high school, the high school standards are highly procedural, and so when that becomes the standard, teachers are judged on how well they do that. So that trickles down to some of the things that Randy's seeing. You're seeing that in the classroom because that is really how the teachers are, in fact, being judged. So their evaluations, in part, are based on how well they deliver the curriculum. And in some states, their evaluations are also based in part on the student test scores. So they're locked into a system that really is standardizing them as well.
And that's the thing is so many teachers, in order to speak out against this, they have to quit their job. Because if they speak out against this, and I know this for a fact in Texas, they will lose their job because mm-hmm. there's this new vision for education, and it's the standardization and the evaluation of teachers, and these preconceived. That's what C-Scope was. It was a 3-part system. You had your scope and sequence, you had your lesson given to the teacher, and you had the assessment. Whoever controls the assessment controls that lesson, and it's complete control of the teachers as well. Chris, how do we become the voice of those teachers or give power back to the teacher in the classroom? One of the really scary things that I see, and with this next generation of assessments and accountability, all this digital online learning and adaptive assessments and formative assessments where they're daily collecting data on the kid and then the software creates the program for the lesson, you're taking teachers completely out of the picture. Isn't that a really dangerous path that we're going down, Chris?
Yeah, the online issue and putting kids in front of computers and using that as their instruction is very dangerous, because the computer only reacts to the student, okay? Where when you're working with a teacher, the teacher is a good teacher is proactively doing things in the instructional methodology and the instructional sequence to help that student move forward. The computer-based assessment and the computer-based learning can only be reactive based on what the student does. So I think we're making a very big mistake in terms of relying on computer-based education as an instructional tool. That doesn't mean it can't be, used for practice and some of these other more routine things. But when it becomes the instructor, I think we're really lowering the quality of education.
And this is